Here's include AG1, introducing AG1 Next Gen, a daily drink with vitamins, minerals, and probiotics to support overall health. Learn more at drinkag1.com/science.
This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins. On the local news roundup, candidate filing for this fall's municipal elections is underway. There are still lots of questions about just who has decided to run, but the mayor has made a decision. Speaking of mayors, the Monroe City Council takes a vote of no confidence in Mayor Robert Burns. We have that story. Thousands remained without power for much of the week following flooding in the eastern part of the state from Tropical Storm Chantal. 10 guns are seized and multiple arrests made uptown on July 4th. Johnson C. Smith University is on financial probation, and Atrium abruptly ends gender-affirming care for young people. Here to talk about those stories and more is WFAE senior news editor Ely Portillo. Mary Ramsey joins us from the Charlotte Observer, where she is the local government accountability reporter. Ryan Pitkin is co-founder and editor of Queen City News, and David Hodges is an investigative reporter at WBTV. Good morning, everybody. Welcome.
Good morning.
Morning. So candidate
Queen City
filing
nerd, by the way.
Pardon me? Quincy, what did
Queen
I
City
say?
Nerd. I just resent Queen City News for rebranding into our name, so I have to say
I'm sorry, Ryan. Forgive
Happy
me.
Friday.
We're coming in hot.
After all the money you spent for cameras, you should be excited about that. No, thank you very much for correcting me. Candidate filing for municipal elections in Charlotte and elsewhere in Mecklenburg County opened on Monday, as we all know by now, I think, and it goes through noon next Friday. All the seats on City Council are open. The mayor is up for re-election, and there are 6 district seats on Charlotte School Board that are up for grabs. Yesterday, Charlotte Mayor Vi Lyles announced she would officially file for re-election. Mary, on Wednesday of next week, she announced she would file. Why didn't she just file?
Yeah, that's been the big question these last few days. I think sort of what everyone had been hearing for a few weeks now was that she was going to seek re-election. And then when candidate filing opened and she didn't make an announcement, there was no sort of video on social media launching a campaign. It raised some question marks, but she came out with a statement yesterday, followed it up on social media. It's not exactly odd for a candidate to actually wait a couple days between when they announce and when they go to the Board of Elections, mainly because they want to be able to invite the media to come out and take some pictures when they're at the board. So that in and of itself, not insanely odd, but definitely raised some question marks that she waited until this far into the relatively short filing period to officially announce her move.
Well, she's been pretty coy about this. She was on this program a couple of months ago, and I asked her if she was planning to run, and she said, as long as this community believes that I have something to contribute, then I will always try to do my very best to serve. Apparently, she determined that was the case, and in her press release announcing her intention to file, she noted her accomplishments over the last several terms, including expanding affordable housing, investing in infrastructure, and improving public safety. She does have a couple of challenges, which we'll talk about later on, but is she likely to have any challengers among members of the council? Because there were people lining up behind her should she have decided not to run.
I wouldn't necessarily put any money on that. I think, if past is precedent, she hasn't really had a serious challenger since she ousted Jennifer Roberts back in 2017. And the sort of vibe on city council has been people waiting until Mayor Lyles retires to sort of get into a battle royale for the seat. So it's possible, anything is possible, but I highly doubt we're going to see, a sort of a mass exodus of council candidates trying to oust her for mayor.
Eli, Mary mentioned the former mayor here, Jennifer Roberts, a moment ago, and Jennifer Roberts chimed in on this announcement yesterday.
That's right. Yesterday afternoon, Jennifer Roberts tweeted or X'd, however you say it now, that she just saw the mayor filed, and she said, quote, waited until filing was halfway through to announce, ... And then Jennifer Roberts said, Charlotteans should have choices. It's a challenging time for our city and country. Maybe I should sign up to run again. And you can't see me unless you're watching on the Facebook, but she put the emoji. So I would be surprised if Jennifer Roberts actually jumps in. It's been a decade at this point, and she's got her climate activism, and I think has her lane settled. But I think that does reflect some of the um, angst that some local Democrats have of how long Mayor Lyles has been there and whether she will step aside for the next generation and when that'll happen. If she wins, she'll be the second longest serving mayor with 10 years, second only behind Pat McCrory in Charlotte's history.
14 years for Pat McCrory.
Yes, that's right.
Is there a strategy behind her waiting, Mary? I'm not sure you can answer this question, but she was very coy about this. She waited till halfway through the filing to announce that she intends to file, but not until next week, 2 days before filing ends. Is there a strategy to this?
I've heard a couple people try and make an argument that this was a strategy to sort of box out any serious challengers. Whether that's true or not, that's not something I've had the opportunity to ask the mayor about her intentions. But yeah, I mean, it certainly raised questions that she waited this long to formally announce. I think it probably did give some other people pause to sort of maybe delay their own candidate filing just to, make sure they weren't locked into another race if she did decide to sort of change her mind from what had sort of been her unofficial message to the Democratic coalition in recent weeks. But yeah, so I think there definitely, like Eli said, there was some little bit of a window of frustration there with some folks. But yeah, I mean, I think, everything is strategic during election season. So, there was certainly some sort of logic behind it to her and her camp.
So it's been 5 days since filing opened. We have another week to go before it ends. Let's talk about who else is running. Montravius King was among the first to file for city council in District 3, along with fellow Democrat Joy Mayo. That seat is currently held, Ryan, by Tijuana Brown. She, of course, is under federal indictment for wire fraud. She says she is not guilty and that she's going to not going to resign, and she is going to run. Has she filed?
No, she's not
No.
done her official filing yet, I don't believe, but she has announced her intention to do so. I believe she's on vacation right now with according to social media, with Charlotte City Council on recess. So she'll probably file as soon as she's back.
So Montravius King has said he will not be talking about the indictment. And of course, in America, you are innocent until proven guilty. Of course, if she is indicted, if she is convicted on the charges, she could not serve. She'd have to step down if she won re-election. But he says he's not going to focus on this. Will this indictment have any impact, do you think, on her election chances?
I don't. I do think it will have some impact. I don't know that it's going to lose her the seat, though. I do think there are a lot of people in that community who stand behind her pretty fervently and have stated their intention to do so. There's been some reporting at some of these town hall meetings where she's gone to, and it hasn't even been brought up. Folks have been interviewed on the way out stating that they stand behind her 100% and didn't even want to ask questions about it. But I do think it'll make it a far more interesting election in terms of city council with a low turnout that it has. Republicans have already said they want to now run against her, a serious candidate. So it should make things a little more interesting at the very least.
Yeah. And the next court date is September 2nd in her case, which is 1 week before the primary. So if anything, were to come out there, it could be a September surprise, so to speak. I think it's even a little more interesting when you look at this district. Some of the other candidates who are running, like Joy Mayo, who works for Trees Charlotte, which I would say is kind of it's small bore, but I would say the establishment candidate, versus Tijuana Brown, who's really staked out a position on the left and tried to push city council more to the left with more worker protections and things like that. So in some ways, I think that this District 3 primary, yes, it'll be sort of a litmus test on whether the indictment matters, but also whether Charlotte City Council keeps this leftward drift or, the more business friendly, let's work together and do things the Charlotte way group wins out.
Ryan and Mary also want to talk about this. Again, Ryan, you first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Mayo is an interesting candidate because she does have sort of that establishment background, but she is also known as a grassroots organizer, and she's co-founder of transforming Nations Ford, and she's done a lot of community work to sort of gain attention for that and see why that wasn't involved. The Nations Ford Arrowwood corridor was not made a corridor of opportunity, was sort of a beef that those community organizers have had. So she does sort of have on the fence of that community organizing background, plus some of the more establishment that comes with her day job or board.
Yeah, I think another interesting wrinkle in this primary worth pointing out is you've sort of got two relatively strong challengers for a city council district. As Eli and Ryan were just saying, Joy Mayo is somebody who does have a presence in that community. And Montravius King is somebody who has run for office before. He served on a city council when he was in college in Elizabeth City and actually gained some national notoriety because of some legal challenges to his candidacy there. So I think it'll be interesting to see, did the two of them sort of split the vote in a primary amongst people who are frustrated with the indictment or want to vote against Councilmember Brown for other reasons, and sort of inadvertently kind of hand her a win in September because they're just sort of dividing up the votes of people who want to vote against her amongst themselves.
David.
And I think it'll just be interesting to see how involved the mayor and others in the quote unquote establishment get in some of these races. They have not had the most successful track record in backing people to take the seats of incumbents, of council members they maybe didn't like or didn't agree with. That could be one of the reasons that Mayor Lyles is running again, as well as seeing out the whole transit plan initiative. Then you also have Councilmember Ed Driggs, who has filed to run it again. And I know he has been thinking about whether or not to run for re-election. So there is a bit of a theme that you can pick up on, that some of the council members want to just kind of try and keep things steady as the transit plan possibly comes to fruition here, and see if they can complete that before hanging up the cleats.
So Kimberly Owens, a Democrat, has filed to run for Tariq Bakari's seat in District 6. Tariq, of course, is the Republican who stepped down to become the number 2 transit official in the Trump administration in Washington. This has been a red district, but apparently Tariq has had a tough time winning in the last 2 elections. He just kind of squeaked by with about, 500 votes over Stephanie
Hand.
Hand, yes, thank you. But Krista Bakari, Tariq's wife, has also said that she wants the seat. Has she filed? Has anyone else other than Kimberly Owens filed?
Last I looked, no one else has, including Krista Bakari. Krista was a very vocal candidate for the appointment to temporarily fill the seat. She got some high profile endorsements from other Republicans, ultimately lost that vote to Edwin Peacock, with Mayor Vi Lyles breaking a tie on the city council. So again, it's possible somebody has squeaked in the hour and 19 minutes. The Board of Elections has been open so far this morning, but so far as I've seen, Kimberly Owens is the only person to officially file for the seat as a Democrat.
Let me shorthand this because I have 90 seconds left in this segment. I believe I'm correct in saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that the incumbents in Districts 4 and 7 have filed. That's Renee Perkins Johnson and Ed Driggs. Are they likely to get any competition?
Renee Johnson is expected to face a challenge from Will Russell. Will Russell ran against her last time around and was endorsed by Mayor Vi Lyles. He ultimately came up short, and Councilmember Johnson kept her seat. So looks like we will have a rematch there in District 4.
And Mayor Lyles does have some competition already. Tigress Sidney Acute McDaniel filed the very first day of filing. She's a Democrat. She's done this before. And also Gemini Boyd has filed. What do we know about them in 30 seconds or less?
Tigress is an biannual candidate every year. Gemini Boyd has not run before. He's a Project Vault community organizer, similar to Lucille Puckett, who's run in the past.
Tigress McDaniel's got name recognition. If you voted in Charlotte, you've seen her name before, trust me.
Yes, she's on there all the time, yes. We're going to come back and wrap the discussion about who's filed for re-election in a moment, and then we'll talk about the transit plan and what's going in Monroe with their mayor. That's interesting stuff. Stay with us at Charlotte Talks.
Monday morning on the next Charlotte Talks, Larry Sprinkle. He's been a fixture in Charlotte broadcasting for decades, first on the radio, then on TV, and most recently as the morning weatherman on WCNC. Larry Sprinkle is entering a new chapter in his long career, and we take a look back and ahead Monday morning at 9 on 90.7 WFAE.
I'm Asma Khalid. For people in Central Texas, it has been a week of loss for their family, their friends, and their community.
Seeing the destruction of our natural beauty, driving through the trees and the winding river, and to see it laid bare, that has found a heavy place in my heart that I did not expect.
That's next time on Here and Now.
Join us for Here and Now later today at noon on WFAE. Support comes from WFAE listeners and Francis Dawson of Homes LKN, a residential realtor broker with over 21 years of experience helping Lake Norman area home sellers and buyers navigate continually changing market conditions. Details at homesoflkn.com.
It's Charlotte Talks on listener-funded 90.7 WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. It's the local news roundup. Hence, Ely Portillo is here. He's our senior news editor here at WFAE News. Ryan Pitkin is co-founder and editor of Queen City Nerve. Mary Ramsey is the local government accountability reporter for the Charlotte Observer, and David Hodges is an investigative reporter for WBTV. Before we move on from who has filed for re-election in municipal elections, there has been a lot of drama, Mary. Gosh knows you've written about this ad nauseum. On city council in recent months, the former city attorney was replaced without explanation and given a payout. Council voted behind closed doors to offer a payout to CMPD Chief Johnny Jennings to avert a potential lawsuit that the chief was considering after a series of texts from former city council member Tariq Bakari went public. We know the payout amount only because the chief released that information. And one council member, Victoria Watlington, leveled allegations of, quote, unethical, immoral, and illegal, end quote, conduct by council or city staff, or both, comments she later tried to walk back. But as a result, the interim city attorney has launched an investigation, one that Watlington is protesting because she says he shouldn't be investigating himself, which raises some questions of its own. And of course, the state auditor has also said he intends to investigate all of this. Will any of this, should any of this be on voters' minds when they vote in November?
It's very possible. Talking to a number of political leaders and strategists on both sides of the aisle, I think, there is a belief that all of this drama could make for a much more interesting local election season than we normally see, especially when you add the fact that we're also likely to have this long-awaited transportation referendum on the ballot. That being said, there has been news before that has left people thinking Charlotte will maybe overcome its turnout problem in local elections, and then that hasn't actually happened. We've continually had very low turnout in these odd year elections. So we'll have to wait and see what actually happens in September and November. But it's certainly possible that all this renewed attention could actually inspire, again, like we're seeing in District 3, some strong challengers who can maybe excite people. Something like the transportation referendum, drawing more attention to the fact that we are in an election year, that there are races on the ballot later this year. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
Brian.
Right. I think to Mary's point, when you think about these low turnouts, it does mean that the folks who are voting are the ones who are paying attention. And that may be more likely to make an impact on incumbency not helping as much, just in terms of if it were, presidential year, some big ticket thing happening, then name recognition might be the whole name of the game. I think some of these folks, if we end up like we did in 2023 with a 5% turnout in the primary, it's going to be a lot of folks who are quite engaged, and that could lead to trouble for some incumbents, I think, with the craziness that's happened.
And I think for the same reason that Ryan just mentioned is why I'm starting to hear some rumblings about whether or not trying to rush a transit referendum onto the ballot this time around might be not the wisest choice. You have all the drama that you had just mentioned, Mike, and that Mary has been reporting on. And that just leaves a lot of wiggle room when you have a very low voter turnout about what could possibly happen. Right. So maybe a wait and see approach is something that's slightly being considered.
We're going to talk about the transportation plan in just a second, but I want to hopscotch along through some other mayor races in the towns surrounding Charlotte. Matthews Mayor John Higdon is the only candidate so far to have filed for that position. Incumbent Huntersville Mayor Christy Clark, also at the moment, at least as of yesterday afternoon, the only person to have filed in that race. And the same is true for the incumbent Davidson Mayor Rusty Knox. In Cornelius, incumbent Mayor Woody Washam Jr. has a challenger, Dennis Below, or Bildo. This is a rematch between the two as Washam seeks his 5th term. How close was that race last time? Anybody know? Okay.
Not off the top of my head. You stumped me.
No, come on, Mike. It's Friday.
Well, Mr. Bildo says it's time for a change, but he said that last time too, so we'll see. All right, one issue that is likely, we already talked about this, we've alluded to it, likely to be on November's ballot is the referendum for the 1-cent sales tax for our transportation plan. It cleared the General Assembly, the governor signed it, so now Mecklenburg County Commission will decide on whether to put it on the ballot in November for voters to say yes or no to. We had at-large County Commissioner Lee Altman on this program on Wednesday. She's also a member of the Metropolitan Transit Commission. She acknowledges that the plan is not the one planners had hoped for, but that some imperfections are better than no transit expansion, and the time to move on this is now.
Because we have really urgent transit and infrastructure needs, and every year we delay, they grow by the billions, and what we can afford to build with the money we have shrinks.
And although this plan has been criticized in some quarters by those concerned that a regressive sales tax, all sales taxes are regressive, by the way, will hurt the very people who depend on transit the most. And because it won't bring light rail to Matthews, Altman is still on board nonetheless.
I know I can't do everything that I would like to do. I would love to have had light rail all the way to Matthews. Absolutely. That would be the best case outcome. But my most important obligation as an at-large county commissioner and serving on the Metropolitan Transit Commission is to move people, because I respectfully disagree that it's not about getting someone to their job 5 minutes earlier. It's about getting them to their job at all.
So County Commission intends to hold some hearings on this before they vote in, I think, September on whether or not to put this on the November ballot. How will public hearings help, given that this is the plan that we have to vote on, because this is the plan that was signed into law by the governor? It's this plan or no plan. So why have public hearings?
Well, for one, they have to put it on the ballot as a referendum. So, there is kind of an element of, hey, yeah, that's the way it works. But two, I think it's an early chance, kind of going back to what David said, to work on the message and see what people are concerned about, presumably opponents, people who are worried about this, like Robert Dawkins, who was on this show, will come and speak and tell the public what their problems are with it. So they give the organizers and the backers a chance, one, to start making their case, and two, to see what issues there are that they'll need to combat and work around with the public.
And messaging appears to be key, although we, because we're in the media, have been following this very closely for what seems like since I was born.
Oh, come on, only 6 years.
It's been a long time. There are evidently a lot of people out there, when you say transit plan, November, referendum, what? They have no idea what you're talking about. So messaging is going to be really important in this, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're less than 4 months away from the election, I believe. So like David was saying, if there's going to be a ballot referendum, all indications are that there are. The county commission says that they're going to place it on the ballot. Then the folks like the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance who are backing this plan have to swing their campaign into action really quickly. I mean, we're in the last about 110 days before the election, unless my math is really bad, but it's in that ballpark. So not a lot of time to get that message across.
Let me ask a question that I've never asked before, and I don't believe I've ever heard asked. This bill that the governor signed allows a referendum to take place on this transit plan. The Mecklenburg County Commission has to decide whether or not to put it on the ballot in November. If they decide that they need more time, that the messaging is not going to be effective, or that this is not a good election in which to put it because too few people will vote, could they table it and put it on the ballot in a year or 2 years? Or is this is this a now or never?
I believe they could put it on the ballot later.
Yes, that's my understanding as well.
Yeah,
And that's being discussed.
Like the quarter-cent sales tax that the county already has the authority to put on a referendum, they could do that in the future. So, I mean, I'll personally be shocked if they do. I think going back 2 topics, that's one of the reasons Vi Lyles decided to run again, is because this plan has been her signature initiative, and I think she wants to see it over the finish line or to the starting line, whichever one you want. But that is possible under the enabling legislation.
Okay, moving on. 2 weeks ago, we heard about dissatisfaction swirling around the Waxhaw Town Commission over the mayor there dropping the F-bomb multiple times during a meeting. This week, there was controversy on Monroe City Council, where they took a vote of no confidence this week in their mayor. The vote was 5-2. David, what is this all about?
The town council was upset with Mayor Robert Burns using some of the city's letterhead, as well as some stationery, things with the city's logo on it, to express some of his personal views and political opinions. In the past, he has published posts on Facebook criticizing what he calls, quote, beta males who are snowflakes, as well as making some statements on Monroe not being a sanctuary city. So they were a little frustrated with that, as well as some of their complaints with how he was running council meetings and not necessarily informing them of everything that was to come.
I remember, people probably don't remember this, but I do, because we talked about it years ago when he took the office of mayor, Robert Burns. He was elected on a coin toss.
Yes, exactly.
Because the vote ended up in a perfect tie. I think there were 700 votes or something like that.
It was like 741 or something. It was a very small number.
Great example of why voting is important.
That's a good segue for me to bring back an earlier topic, because I just wanted to confirm that it was right first. But that Dennis Bilodeau, Woody Washam, and Cornelius was the one from 2 years ago that was a 5-vote difference. So that'll be that rematch. I just wanted to bring that back because I thought that was the one.
So folks, get out and vote, because if you don't come out and vote, you let one person or a coin decide the election there. But prior to this no confidence vote, Mayor Burns spoke with Queen City News, Ryan, and admitted that not everyone likes him.
Well, I have a lot of critics, sure, but I also have a lot of supporters. And I got elected here to do something, and I've never changed who I am.
So what is the upshot of this no confidence vote? Does it mean anything in terms of his continuing in that position? Does it, is it a cautionary tale to him going forward? What does it mean, David?
Well, a little bit more of a cautionary tale and to send a message. However, there was an outcome in this that I guess has some impact, if not real tangible, more so than this no confidence vote. And that was that Mayor Pro Tem David Dotson, as our Dedrick Russell reported, was stripped of his title in a similar vote as Mayor Pro Tem. So there's just a lot of dissatisfaction and divide on the Monroe Council, which we're seeing in many councils across the region.
Yeah, and apparently there's a lot of dissatisfaction and divide among citizens in Monroe, because WBTV spoke with several people. Here's 2 of them.
I think it's political, and I think it's ridiculous. I don't think it has anything to do with city business.
I think it's one step in the right direction. We're gradually making baby steps towards hopefully getting him completely out.
How representative, maybe you don't know the answer to this, are these 2 people of the citizens of Monroe in all of this?
It's hard to say. You have sometimes the loudest voice in these conversations are the ones who are most committed. What I have seen more generally across Union County is that there are political factions that have extremely rabid supporters who will show up, make their voices heard on social media, in meetings, and can make it seem like there is a much greater groundswell for support for the mayor or not for the mayor. That's not always indicative of what you see on the ballot box.
So one of the Republican senators who voted to confirm Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense, North Carolina's Tom Tillis, this week told CNN's Jake Tapper that he had made a mistake.
With the passing of time, I think it's clear he's out of his depth as a manager of a large, complex organization.
So why is Tillis, Eli, just now coming to this opinion?
Well, he said if he knew what he knew then, he would still cast his vote yes. But he says seeing how Pete Hegseth has actually performed on the job has not been good. So if he knew what he knew now, he would have voted no. The other thing is, of course, he's not running for re-election, so he can speak his mind and not worry about annoying the Republican base.
This comment comes after a series of missteps and possible failures of communication by Hegseth running the department that many say is now a department in chaos and one that is putting our national security at risk. Tillis described his latest misstep, the pausing of arms shipments to Ukraine, evidently without the president's knowledge, as amateurish. That's his word. And he told Jake Tapper that when he, as you said, Eli, when he cast his vote, he gave the Senate Armed Services Committee the benefit of the doubt.
I don't regret the decision I made back then based on the facts as I knew them today, then. But today I am beginning to wonder if maybe Armed Services was a little bit generous with respect to their assessment of his capabilities as a manager of the world's largest, most complex, and arguably consequential organization.
So you don't regret it, but if you had to do it again today, you probably wouldn't vote yes?
I think based on the information I have today, if all I had was the information on the day of the vote, I'd certainly vote for him again. But now I have the information of him being a manager, and I don't think that his probationary period's been very positive.
You know, a lot of Democrats and even some Republicans expressed concerns about Hegseth's suitability and qualifications for running an organization the size of the Department of Defense well in advance of that vote. So I have two questions. Tillis says he prides himself on doing his due diligence, but he also gave the Armed Services Committee, on which he used to serve, I'm told, the benefit of the doubt. And yet it's no secret that Republican members on that committee are largely aligned, almost completely aligned with Donald Trump, who wanted Hegseth at the Pentagon. So did Tillis do enough due diligence or just fall in line with the party? And question two, now that he's decided not to run, is he now finding his voice because he has nothing to lose?
Question two, I think yes. Very much so. He even said during that interview, you know, for the next 18 months, he'll be more free to do, you know, I'm paraphrasing here, but to do what he thinks is right. Question one, I mean, what he said is he did all his due diligence and he was unsure until the last moment, but in the end, he deferred to the folks who knew best. You know, I think we've all seen people who interview well for a job and then they get on the job and you're like, oh man, it's not the person who I thought it was. That's pretty much what Tillis is saying here. Of course, you know, we're not talking about the manager of Denny's. We're talking about the Secretary of Defense.
His track record, if you looked at his resume, his track record for running much smaller organizations was not good.
Yeah, I mean, I thought there were some pretty serious questions there, but, you know, I am not on the Senate.
And is this illustrative? You just said that he now feels freer to do what he thinks is right. Is this illustrative of the problem that all elected members of Congress face, that they teeter between doing what they believe is right and what they believe their constituents or their party wants them to do? And I have 20 seconds.
Yes. And, you know, that is a problem as America becomes more polarized and the base and winning that primary matters more than winning the general a lot of times.
So when we come back, we had some flooding of problems of our own in North Carolina this week. We'll talk about that, the arrival of the NAACP convention beginning tomorrow, and an interesting case with atrium and transgender care.
Next time on 1A, more than 120 people are confirmed dead in the Texas flash floods from this weekend. A quarter of those children, dozens are missing. What happened with the flood warning system and how much federal help can Texas expect? We also look at the tussle over tariffs as it continues. All that and more on the Friday News Roundup next time on 1A at 10 o'clock.
Peter Sagal here from Wait, Don't Tell Me. You know that car you've been hanging on to because it makes you look young and full of life? Well, to be honest, you haven't aged a bit, but the car, on the other hand, it's looking a little, soft around the timing belt. Here's a thought: why not donate it to public radio? You will still look fabulous, maybe more so as you bask in the glow of doing the right thing for your favorite NPR station. It takes years off you. Here's how to donate.
Visit WFAE.org/cars to learn more.
Support comes from WFAE listeners and via Health Partners, an independent nonprofit hospice and palliative care provider serving more than 5,000 patients daily across 38 counties in the Carolinas. Via Health Partners, more at viahp.org. And support comes from Catawba College, committed to educational innovation, sustainability, business advancement, and healthcare improvement. More about Catawba's Good Goes Far initiative at catawba.edu.
It's Charlotte Talks on the local news roundup on 90.7 WFAE and WFAE.org. I'm Mike Collins. Because it's the local news roundup, Ely Portillo has graced us with his presence. He's senior editor for WFAE News. David Hodges is an investigative reporter for WBTV. Ryan Pitkin is co-founder and editor of Queen City Nerve. And Mary Ramsey is the local government accountability reporter for the Charlotte Observer. Even though it pales in comparison to what happened in the Texas Hill Country with flooding that killed several hundred people this week. North Carolina had several counties also dealing with flooding this week. They declared states of emergency in 3 counties as the results of the remnants of Tropical Storm Chantal coming through. Exactly, Eli, where was the worst of this, and what exactly happened?
Yeah, so the worst of this was in central North Carolina and Chapel Hill. There was flooding in rivers like the Eno River, some areas, not a large area geographically, but covering a few counties, got more than 10 to 12 inches of rain in just a few hours, which is a massive amount. So some shopping centers were completely flooded. Some homes were flooded. I believe at this point there have been 2 deaths reported. I-40 and I-85 were closed. There were states of emergency in Moore and Alamance and some other central counties. Yeah. And really, I think coming so soon after Texas, there was also a lot of concern about some of the day camps and other camps around the Eno River in central North Carolina. And WUNC has reported that several of those, were closed for flooding, and children were not able to go there. So I think there was a lot of scary echoes that happened.
Yeah. About 20,000 people, I'm told, lost power. Interstates closed for a time. As you mentioned, businesses and homes were flooded. Nearly 200 people had to be rescued from these flood waters. 2 people, as you mentioned, lost their lives. The state of North Carolina has allocated billions of dollars to Hurricane Helene recovery efforts because it's needed desperately in the western part of the state. I was going to ask, do we have money for this? And then I discovered that Governor Josh Stein, speaking in Mebane, it's Mebane, right?
That's what they tell me.
A town hard hit by I always want to call it Mebane, but a town hard hit by the storm. He called on lawmakers while he was there to make sure funding for emergency management is strong as storms become stronger and more damaging.
We need a new budget that will make sure that our state emergency management is well funded. There are real funding concerns with the federal government. A lot of our emergency management personnel is paid for from federal funding.
So I was going to ask if we had money for this. Is that federal funding still coming? Is FEMA going to be involved in, or have they been involved in this recovery effort?
I haven't seen FEMA involved in this recovery effort. I think in North Carolina, the biggest issue right now is that we still don't have the budget passed. The legislature's on a break. They're supposed to come back, but the House and the Senate are really far apart. And there's also not federal emergency funds, but federal Medicaid and SNAP funds that are gone now under the big, beautiful bill. That is going to take hundreds of millions of dollars if the state wants to fill that hole, and that's going to squeeze other needs.
And funds for schools are missing as well. CMS reports they're $12 million out of funding, which is going to be retained by the federal government at the moment, and that is going to put more of a burden on both the local governments and the state governments if we want to have support personnel in the classrooms and other things available to teachers. And it should be pointed out that the General Assembly is on break, but the holdup on the budget is an argument between House and Senate Republicans. not the Democrats, the Republicans. So are they likely to hear this appeal from the governor? Are they likely to pay any attention to it?
Well, disaster funding has been one of the few things that they've been able to come to an agreement on, kind of the House and Senate meeting halfway. So I think that there is more room for compromise there than with some of these other issues where they've been really far apart, like teacher and state employee pay, and there hasn't been movement. But again, with a couple $100 million at least whole blown in the state budget that wasn't there a few weeks ago, it's going to be even harder than it was last month for them to find common ground.
And I should mention that $12 million missing from CMS's budget because of stopping of funding from the federal government affects school systems across the state and, in fact, across the country, not just at CMS. The NAACP has chosen Charlotte as the site for their 116th annual convention. It opens tomorrow. Last year's convention, Mary, was held in Las Vegas. 23,000 people, I'm told, showed up for it there. How many are we expecting?
Yeah, the number is expected to be in the thousands again. Certainly something that a lot of uptown hotels and businesses are looking forward to. Summer can be a bit of a sleepy time of year for those businesses. Not as many events and games going on at the stadiums and Spectrum Center, that kind of thing. So certainly something that the tourism industry is looking forward to.
And the NAACP's convention theme is the fierce urgency of now. That's a phrase coined by Dr. Martin Luther King during a speech at the Lincoln Memorial on the 1963 March on Washington. Organizers believe that the theme reflects the current political climate, and that's one reason they have decided to break with an 84-year-old tradition and not invite Donald Trump to speak. They believe his policies are working at cross purposes with the NAACP's mission. Dominic Hawkins is with the national organization, and he told WFAE News the decision not to invite Trump is tied to his actions.
This president is engaging in authoritarian tactics and strongman tactics and has been working to erode civil rights, has working to erode the quality of life for American people.
And Corrine Mack, who's the head of the local chapter of the NAACP, explained it this way.
We know that people are afraid. We understand that they're afraid, but we want them to know that they're not alone. And our responsibility has always been, even when you are afraid, to move past your fear and move in the struggle anyway to create change.
So we talked about this a little bit yesterday. They invited Donald Trump every year of his previous presidency, and he declined to come. They invited candidate Trump to come, and he declined to speak at the convention. They've invited every sitting president in modern history. Some of them came, some of them did not, stretching back to Harry Truman in 1947. Has there been any notable reaction to their decision not to invite a sitting president?
Not that I've seen. I think that it was kind of expected. I mean, he never came before, as you said, when invited. There's been so much more animus this time around in the second term, even than the first. I mean, it's the kind of thing where there's not a ton of upside for either of them. Like, he comes and gets booed relentlessly. They invite him and get protested. I mean, I think it's kind of just probably a little bit of relief on both sides.
Yeah. Ryan.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a symbolic move in the sense that, like Eli said, he wasn't going to come anyway, but it did give them a chance to sort of release a statement and be bold in their statement that we're not going to even give the guy a symbolic invite. And it gave them a chance. They actually used some pretty bold language in there saying that he's playing from the fascist playbook, which a lot of people are sort of scared of that F word, or at least were in the first term. And they're coming out now in a more steadfast way and saying, calling his actual policies fascist, and especially calling out the way that his war against DEI goes 100% against what they stand for and why they exist.
We're going to be taking a closer look at the mission of the NAACP and what this convention hopes to accomplish when we speak to some leaders of that organization on Tuesday morning on this program at 9 o'clock. Speaking of policies that people are looking at with the jaundiced eye in some areas, ICE. ICE arrests are on the rise around North Carolina. New data from the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency shows 160% increase in the number of daily arrests this year as compared to the same time last year. Becca O'Neill is an immigration attorney with the Carolina Migrant Network, which provides pro bono legal services to those arrested by ICE. And she told WFAE they are struggling to keep up.
They sort of promote this narrative that all immigrants are criminals. The intent, and it's been pretty successful, is to criminalize immigrant communities.
So are they arresting, as Trump promised, the most dangerous criminals among us who have committed heinous crimes, or do most of these people not have criminal records, Eli?
It is a mix. Many of them don't have criminal records. I believe 20%
Nearly half. Nearly half have no criminal records.
Yes, and nearly, I think more than 20% just have immigration status, not even any pending charges. But many of the crimes that they are accused of are also immigration related or work related, like using, false social security numbers, which I mean is a criminal thing. We can talk about how serious that is. It's certainly not in the category of like murder and cannibalism, like the DHS Secretary Kristi Noem has talked about. I think it's interesting to note that even though this is a big increase and there's a lot of fear associated with it and a lot more quick deportations, we're still talking 1,600 people in North Carolina over this time frame. It's nowhere near the pace of millions and millions, 13, 14, 15 million, these numbers that the administration has been throwing out. So they're causing a lot of fear and disruption, but for them to actually hit the numbers they've promised their base, they have to do a lot more.
Yeah. Well, they have funded ICE with more money than any law enforcement agency in the history of the United States of America. It's well in excess of $80 billion to do what they're doing. I would presume that in the years and months to come, you'll see these efforts ramp up. David, did you want to chime in on this?
I was just going to mention to Eli's point there, my colleague Naomi Coles at WBTV is actually working on a story which will be on next week about how to hit those numbers for ICE and what they're going about with that, which is showing up to some of these civil proceedings where people are already in the process of the deportation or their citizenship and making arrests there and essentially continuing the case in a different way. So it's a numbers game, essentially.
WFAE reported this week that the parents of a transgender child in Huntersville tell us that Atrium Health told them it will end gender-affirming care for youth by the end of this month.
I got the call on Tuesday from our doctor who made a personal call to several of her patients to warn them and say, hey, by the end of July, I'm not going to be able to treat your kid.
That's Amanda Dumas. She and her husband Josh spoke to WFAE about the care for their 14-year-old transgender boy that he had been receiving.
Atrium hasn't told us anything. Everything that we've learned has been word of mouth from other doctors, from other providers, from people in the community, other patients.
And since we spoke with those parents, Atrium issued a statement that did not confirm or deny the change, but stated, quote, "We want to share our continued commitment to providing care that is medically appropriate, legally compliant, and rooted in compassion." And they later mentioned that they operate within a dynamic legal and regulatory landscape. What does that mean, Eli?
Well, it's, I think, important to note that North Carolina has already passed a law saying you can't do these kind of treatments like hormones and puberty blockers for minors, like a lot of states have in the last year or so. But kids who are already receiving them were grandfathered in. And now those parents and some advocacy groups are telling us that Atrium is saying we're not going to continue the treatment for those kids who are grandfathered in. The Supreme Court recently affirmed state bans on transgender care for minors can stand, and the DOJ has said that they're going to investigate doctors and providers who provide those. So I think reading, excuse me, between the lines of Atrium's statement saying that they are following a dynamic regulatory environment and the law and all that stuff, it seems like they are reacting to these federal moves to kind of stamp out the last vestiges of this. But again, they have not actually confirmed or denied what the parents and advocacy groups have told us.
So Attorney General Pam Bondi just this month issued more than 20 subpoenas to doctors and clinics that provide gender-affirming care to minors. They are investigating them for healthcare fraud, making false statements, and potential violations of laws like the False Claims Act and the Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act. Bondi also invoked laws against female genital mutilation, claiming that they apply to certain gender-affirming procedures performed on minors. That may be true in some cases, but it doesn't sound like it's true in this case that we're talking about from these parents in Huntersville. Are there no protections surrounding the doctor-patient relationship? Should the medical establishment be advocating for that? Should they just roll over and play dead like Harvard and like CBS News?
Well, I think Harvard is still fighting. And I should disclose here, I am a graduate of Harvard, so or a school in Cambridge, as we say. But when you look at the doctor-patient relationship, I mean, yes, there are privileges there, but it falls within the larger boundaries of the law. And I think it's very easy to imagine a multi-state system like Atrium saying, look, the federal government is issuing subpoenas. States are banning this. There's talk of prosecuting clinicians who do this. We're not going to touch this. It's radioactive.
Okay, very quickly, because we have 90 seconds left. David, the city of Charlotte Fire have reached an agreement with Medic to say they will help will help improve response times and improve the system. This has been going on for a while. What does this all mean?
Yeah, for several years, Charlotte firefighters have been complaining about a change in medic policy, which essentially keeps them out of the scene longer doing paramedic services where medic does not show up or takes a long time to show up. This new agreement should maybe help medic get there faster and placate the fire department.
And this agreement that they've come to renews every 90 days. Why?
There's a lot of disagreement about essentially medic had been providing money to the city in a way that wasn't happening anywhere else across the state to reimburse the fire department for certain services that it was doing. So I think everyone realized we have a really weird deal going here already, and let's just reach a short-term conclusion for right now.
Charlotte Fire told WBTV that the new developments are an important first step, but that significant system-level improvements are still needed. So I guess we'll continue to follow this story, which seems to never end for something so small. Maybe it's not small at all. David Hodges with us, reporter for WBTV. Ryan Pitkin, co-founder and editor of Queen City Nerve. Mary Ramsey, local government accountability reporter for the Charlotte Observer. And Ely Portillo, senior editor for WFAE News. Thank you all for the hour.
Charlotte Talks is a production of 90.7 WFAE.